What would you like to say about what's happened to Iraq since the invasion?
Well, it started when the super tanks of the Americans have walked or literally streamed down the side streets in the city to destroy the infrastructure of what is below the ground. From that day that I've seen it, I knew that the Americans came here to destroy Iraq. And what happened afterwards is the handing over to the militias and the Iranians and to the fascists and to the thieves of the universe. $600 trillion that went since the invasion until today. And we find children, old women, old people from the ages of 8 and 7 begging in the streets between streaming cars, trying to sell or to wipe a screen just to beg for something like 10 pence or what's equivalent, or 15 pence in equivalent British money. But nevertheless, you would see that the decimation of health, education, services, roads, even the military is decimated. All the tanks and the efforts that come to Iraq, it's almost divided in half, given to the militias, an equivocal amount to what the Iraqi military people have. So the Iraqi military today, even the president of Iraq and the prime minister, believe me, they live in fear of what they do or what they try to do because of the militias. People walk into the streets selling drugs like no way. You've never seen anything like that in America, Britain, or anywhere in Europe. And people, when they get arrested, they are released within 24 hours. Their followers come down surrounding police stations with a show of military might, and they drag him out, and they go down hailing him down the streets on their shoulders. He's known. Killers. People walk down the streets and they kill. They show their strength. And when they get to be arrested, they are released within 24 hours. It's an amazing scene in here. People live in fear. Doctors are living in fear. A man would go in and strike and hit and do whatever, and nobody can defend these people in here. The education system, the actual teaching matters have reduced to almost an amazing low standard. So much so that people are appointed without any qualifications. People are, imagine somebody would go in and the Minister of Finance was questioned about the budget of Iraq. And then he gets to appoint somebody who has no knowledge. And he puts him in for the Minister of Oil to direct the distribution of Iraqi oil. And they put him in there, and he got all the heads of departments in the meeting. And he asked them a question each, and they all said, according to what their knowledge is and their position, what should be and should not be done. And he turned to this guy who was appointed as a manager of the distribution of all Iraqi oil. And the guy said, look, it is like a pot of rice and a pot of soup. You give some of this, and you give some of this, and you give some of this, you add it to that, and you do whatever, and you present it to whoever wants it. And when there's a little bit more rice left, you just put a little bit more gravy on it. That's the way it should be done. And he turned around, the Minister of Finance, turning to them to say, do you know, all of you don't know anything. This guy knows the best. This is the way it's run. Imagine the Prime Minister coming out so soon after declaring the budget for the year 23, 24, and 25, when at the time, the budget for 2021 and 2022 has not been declared. And then he turns around and he says in his statement, it is now that the Iraqi dinar is stronger than the dollar. And that's why we have to spend and give people whatever they need. Imagine at a time when the Iraqi dinar is being sold on the street by the Central Bank of Iraq at 1,470 to the dollar, not the reverse. And he says the Iraqi dinar is stronger. And now we have to sell it as 1,320. That is a prime minister telling you his currency is stronger than the American dollar and is getting sold in 1,320 dinars to the dollar. Imagine what kind of, a child in a primary school couldn't say that. This is the way it is run. The militias, imagine no one in Iraq can control the registration of lands because everybody goes on with his might, with his troops and with his guys behind, armed, and they go in and take pieces of land as what they wish. And they build on it, and then they get given to them for peanuts. And today it's gone to the sky, and the people that can afford it are only the people who pilfered the money from Iraq. This is the way it is done. The rivers are empty of water because Iran had shut down all the streams of the water that comes from the mountains in the east of Iraq. The building of dams in Turkey had reduced the amount of flow of water to the Euphrates and the Tigris. And in Basra, for months and months, the smell of rotten stuff that's laying at the bottom was the river. What was the river? It's a scene you wouldn't find it in a sewage farm refinery. You would never imagine it. The marshes in the south of Iraq are dried up totally. When they stood against Saddam at the time, and they said he dried the marshes to kill the people in there and to move them out, yet it was because to stop the infiltration of the Iranian troops through the marshes to come into Iraq. He dried that. But later on, he opened it. Now the Iranians had decided to stop the water coming into the east of Iraq. Wow. And they literally, wherever there were farms of making corns and wheat, they set them on fire. And the people are sitting down watching them. Iranians are moving into the east of Iraq to take over oil wells. And believe it or not, they went so far as registering new companies that sells oil to Iraq from its own oil wells, and nobody would stop them.
Wow.
The actual infiltration of Iraqi printed money in Iran and sent in to buy dollars in Iraq to move the wealth of Iraq onto Iran, which is supposed to be under an embargo. Now, imagine the people in here today, they know all that. So much so when they go to shops and they say, is this Iranian food or is this Iraqi food or whatever? Most of them would stop buying this stuff in support of their own farmers. But now there are no farms. There's no produce.